This week's edition of the Wellbeing Show. I'm your host, Noel McDermott. I think I am. Yes, I'm both of those things. Just remember my name. We were talking about age before the show, and these two young whippersnappers, Ryan, who's my guest, and my sort of would-be techie, James, in the background, are claiming they're old at 28. They're lucky they're not in the same room as me, because I might have to slap them with things like that to my face. So I'm feeling particularly old and broken after that conversation, but I'll try and get over it and entertain you this evening. It's the 15th February. If you listen to this on that day at 9 o'clock UK time, then it's live. It'd be lovely to hear from you. Join in, drop us a line. We're on live on Facebook Live, on my YouTube channel, and on LinkedIn. So for there. And you can also drop me a line on WhatsApp, 07506 319 745, +44 7506 319 745. It'd be great to hear from you. I got an amazing guest on this evening. It really was very inspired by the guy, even though I'm teasing him about his age, but very inspired by the guy when we had our pre-show chat on the phone the other day. Ryan is one half of the Cancer Twins, and they are twins, two non-identical brothers who had pretty frightening experiences with cancer, and then decided to do something about that and not just sort of live in the fear and not just get over it, but to sort of put something back in the world and help other guys. So we're going to hear this really interesting, but also it may be a slightly triggering story for some guys. So if it is frightening and triggering for you, that's okay. Make sure you talk to somebody about it. And above all, guys, get the checks done. That's got to be the strong moral of this story. Enough of me, but over to you, Ryan. Ryan, welcome. You're on half term, so you haven't been beaten up by the 4-year-olds today.
Not yet. Well, I feel like I was beaten up through the term. Right. Managed to take my rest now and can just enjoy it and relax a little bit, and then back into war in a couple of days' time.
Yeah, I mean, you are, interestingly, you're one of those rare things, a male primary school teacher, which is a very rare beast indeed. What attracted you to that, to getting into primary school teaching?
It's just, I think it's something I've always been interested to since I was young. I was just saying to the guy before that I think when I was growing up, I was fixated on being a police officer. Yeah. But at the time, there was lots of police cuts and they weren't really taking anyone on. So it was a case of, right, I either become a special and go down a lot of unpaid work and not really know what the answer is after that, or I can go to uni, get some life experience, move away, find my independence again. I think that was another thing on the twin side of life, was you didn't really have that independence. So uni was quite like a bit of a sort of light bulb moment, like, oh, okay, I might be able to find some independence. And you as you grow up, you're always kind of known as Ryan and Sean, and yeah, and I love that. Don't get us wrong, I absolutely adore being a twin, but it does come a point, especially through your teenage years, where you kind of go, I wish there was something that separated us, because everything was quite similar. We were always similar academically, always similar sports-wise, and we pushed each other to those limits, which was good. But I don't know, there was something I just wanted us to be me. So I thought, well, that would be a nice option. And then I thought, I'm interested in teaching, so I went down that route and absolutely loved it. So carried on, got the work experience, and luckily the experience that I got was all positive experience, so it didn't put us off. There was a lot of people that trained and were put off. It could very easily happen to me, like from some of the stories that I heard were pretty awful. So it could very easily happen to me, but I was just really lucky, and that made me want to sort of carry on and continue. And I'm in reception, and that was never my intention. So I know you say about a male being in primary school in general, but a male being in the early years of primary school is even more unheard of. And I remember being put into the early years sort of like in reception for my one of my placements, and I was actually quite frustrated and annoyed. I was thinking, this is going to restrict my chances of getting a job. Really don't want to do this. Is there any chance you can put me just into year 1 or year 2, give me some key stage 1 experience? and they were like, look, please just go for that one, go for a week. If you don't like it and you really put off by it, we'll send you somewhere else. Went for the week. I've never had so much fun in my life.
Yeah, quite. You said, leave me here. I don't want to do the rest of the course.
Yeah, I was like, oh, keep me here, please. And then when I applied for a job, I applied specifically for reception. I didn't want anything else. I thought, I love it down here. We're learning through play. I'm quite like that. I was, well, at the time I was very much active and like loved it, like learning that way. So yeah, it was just seemed to fit right. So everything kind of fell into place that way. I was quite lucky to know what I wanted to do, because a lot of my friends didn't as such, like they kind of fell into jobs. But yeah, I felt quite lucky for that.
I was saying to you before the show, I remember my boy when he was 4. I mean, they're all magical, our kids, all the way through life. But 4-year-old, there's something unique about that age. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's a transition age, obviously, but it doesn't seem to be a traumatic transition. They just are magical, and sort of full of life, and going to school for the first time, they're soaking it up, right?
Yeah.
Like, wow, this world that I just
it's different for them when they come in. They look like lost souls, bless them. Sometimes they're just kind of like looking at you like, okay, and then a week goes by and they're like, you start to get a bit of frustrated and upset because they're like, oh no, this is life now. But they soon come round to it, and they absolutely love it when they're making friends, and when they sort of are learning without even realize they're learning. It is a joy to see. They make so much progress from when they come in to when they leave. It's insane.
Shall we talk specifically about the cancer story, and then we'll maybe go back in time to your sort of early experiences yourself and then your later experiences? Because as you know, I'm always interested in what is it that allows somebody to transform challenging and difficult experiences. But tell us, if you don't mind, in your own words, sort of why you set up the Cancer Twins and what had happened to you and to your brother.
So it was back in 2017. Me and Sean were both 23 years old, and we actually had a bit of a running joke between us, because being twins, we were always generally smaller, and it took us a lot of time to grow facial hair and all that thing. So we said, actually, by the time we'll turn 23, that'll be when we're in our prime. We'll have full beards and stuff like that. So we always had this running joke between us about being 23, and because we were born on the 23rd, it was always a bit of a number for us. So when we finally hit 23, we both were kind of in the prime of our lives. We were both very fit, very healthy, very into our sport, both of us, and kind of a picture for health in terms of what you expect cancer patients to be like. We kind of ticked every box that you should do for not getting cancer. Never smoke, never really drink excessively, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was just got to summer, and I was getting a lot of back pain, and I associated with the sport I was playing. So I went to see a chiropractor, had a few sessions there, thought it was getting better. But it didn't, it got worse, and it was a bit weird. So I just like, kind of, as most men do, just let it ride a little bit and wasn't overly concerned about that. And then I remember being back again for the big summer holidays, and during that time I drove my brother to work, and while he was driving next, I was exhausted in the morning. I said, I'll just drive it back. So he was driving there, and literally while we were having a conversation in the car, like one side, like the whole right side of my body just went completely numb, and I couldn't get my words out to him. I was slurring my words, and then we got there. I kind of like shook it off, and we looked at each other, and he was like, "What was that?" And I was like, "That was really weird, really bizarre." Couldn't really explain what happened. I was quite shook up. I think I might have even got emotional. I didn't really know what had happened. It was a bit scary. My brother went in from work, got some water and everything, and I rang my dad and I told him. He was like, "That's weird. Keep an eye on it, and we'll see." So I drove back home, and I was thinking, if that happens when I'm driving, like, I'm going to crash the car there. So that was the first time that had happened. That was a really scary experience. And then again, this back pain was just getting more intense. And then a couple of days later, again, taking him to work, it almost happened exactly the same time in the same morning. And I thought, do you know when you like sit funny and you like your leg goes dead? I thought, maybe I'm just sitting on a nerve, because I was like in a weird position in the car. Maybe I'm just like killing this nerve, and it's setting my whole body, which is really weird. So it happened again, freaked out, rang my dad again. He said, look, just go straight to the not the GP. Was it the GP? No, like the walk-in centre. Explain your situation and like see what they say. So I did that, went there, and weren't really much help, to be honest. Like, as a young 23-year-old, you have like a 30-second conversation, they go, and then they send you on your way. And yeah, so basically that intensified, that sort of going numb on one side and then passing out, and then it escalated to the point where I would pass out. So obviously we knew something was wrong there. And we went to multiple hospitals because I was over half time. I was back in Sunderland. So I went to Sunderland Hospital, Durham Hospital. Then when I came back down to London, I was in Hillingdon Hospital, like a range of hospitals. They did blood tests. They did like ECGs, all sorts of things. They were very confused. And the end result, what they believed was that it was a separate neurological problem and a separate back problem. So they actually give us a heat pad for my back. Mm-hmm. So I had a heat pad on my back. And I remember walking out of the hospital after that one thinking, they're just doing another blood test. There's no answers here. I'm supposed to start school in a week. Like, how am I supposed to start school and I'm passing out? I can't pass out in front of the kids. That's dangerous. So yeah, it was a bit scary. And then literally as I was walking out of that appointment, my mum was like, should we go for some food? I bet you're exhausted. So we went walking down the street for some food, and I literally just happened again. I passed out on the side. My mum was in a panic. She called the ambulance, although we were right next to the hospital. But an ambulance got sent out. They took us in, and I waited in a different hospital for hours on end. And finally, after multiple checks with a range of doctors, that one of them was pressing my stomach and felt like a mass in my stomach. And they said, "Oh, just to be safe, we're going to send you for a scan." So I sent us for a scan, and then they came back and they said, "Really sorry, but you diagnosed with stage 3 testicular cancer." I was so confused. I just heard cancer. At first, I didn't hear testicular cancer. I just heard cancer, and I was like, wow, like from what I've been growing up with, like cancer's been in the back of my mind. Like I've not really fully experienced it in family. Like I know my nan had it, but they kind of didn't really talk to us much about it. Like it was kind of, she dealt with it, she's fine, blah, blah, blah. It was never really like full in our faces. And you just see it on the TV, like on Coronation Street in Emmerdale. And it's always the extreme cases where they're literally on their deathbeds.
Yeah.
And, you associate cancer with death basically. And that's literally what I heard. I was like,
even though mostly people survive and are fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been quite terrifying to get that diagnosis.
Oh, absolutely. So terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And then there was the confusion because I was like, testicular cancer, but you found a lump in my stomach. Like what?
So I couldn't scan on you prior to that?
No. So that was the first time the scan is. It was all blood tests previously, but to get the levels that they need to test for testicular cancer, it's a specific blood test. Like if you're just doing general blood, you're not going to get that result. If that makes sense.
No, I totally understand.
So then they did another blood test after the scan to check, and basically your HCG levels was actually a pregnancy marker for women, which are supposed to be between 0 and 2. No, sorry, between 0 and 5, but generally below 2. And if they went above 5, then they would be like concerned, and if they say, hang on, there's something not right here. And by the time they'd actually diagnosed me, mine were at 175,000. So I was pretty messed up. I was pregnant with about triplets, to be honest,
if not
which is what I would dream of now, to be honest. But yeah, it was pretty bad, and I need to start more.
When did the testicular bit sink in? Because you said it didn't sort of register at first; it was just cancer, death sentence.
Yeah. It was a little while later. I was thinking, and then I remember like being when we're going home. I remember like looking down in that area and having a feel and being like, what's wrong with my testicles? They're both here. I can't feel anything. They don't look any different. There's no pain there. I was so confused, and I was like, but you can feel it in my stomach. Like that's not my testicles. Honestly, I was just such a naive 23-year-old that knew nothing about it. I just really couldn't put 2 and 2 together.
So it's like the back pain a normal thing? Was that sort of when you discovered about it? Did you ask them and say,
yes, it can be. It can be. So there's a couple of people that I've spoke to that have not had any symptoms in the testicles in themselves, but they have experienced lower back pain. The problem with that is you tell people lower back pain is a symptom. It's a symptom of a million other things. So, if you had that and then you also had a pain or a heaviness or something else in that area, then you might think, okay, but minus that, if you just have back pain, 99% of the time, it's not going to be testicular cancer, if you know what I mean.
And what was the sort of numbing and blackouts? Did they explain that to you, what that was?
So that was the tumor pressing on a nerve in my spine.
Right.
So that was what it was as it was growing. it was progressively pushing on this nerve more and more, and that was causing it to, if again, it had to be sitting a certain way, but that would then push the tumor onto, because I had like a tumor in my groin and a tumor in my stomach. The one in my groin was like 8 by 7, and the one in my stomach was like 12 by 9. So they're quite large tumors with nodules around my lungs. So it made sense that when they said they were pressing on something, it made sense that that's what was happening. So literally after my first round of chemo, that by the time it started shrinking, then that back pain had gone instantly. It was so strange. The first couple of days, that first cycle, after that, I didn't get any back pain anymore. I mean, I got a whole lot of other stuff, but I didn't get the back pain.
So what was the treatment once they knew? I guess stage 4, I don't know much about what the stages mean. Stage 1 would be the sort of earliest stage, and then stage 5 is the end of the story. Is that right?
Yes. So mine was kind of stage 3. So as far as I'm aware, stage 1 is like localized. You just need to whip it out, and generally that's pretty much it. Stage 2 is it started to spread to some lymph nodes around that area. Stage 3, it moves up, moves more kind of like up towards the stomach, around the lungs. Stage 4, I think, is brain, but stage 4 with any type of cancer is kind of incurable. So no matter kind of like how much treatment you can have to kind of contain it, likelihood of it coming back at some later stage is pretty much definitely. So I feel like I'm lucky to have just missed that, but I also still have that fear anyway because of everything else that I've been through. So
very serious stage, very serious growth, very late catching it, but they did catch it.
They did,
and we'll come to lessons learned as well. And then what was the treatment? What happened to you after that?
So treatment was a course of the BEP. So everyone, the general testicular cancer patient, will just have a course of BEP, and then that would be their sort of treatment over. But for me, I had a course of BEP
therapy. Is that right?
Yeah, BEP is a type of chemotherapy. Yeah, I don't know what it stands for, but it's just known as BEP. Then I had something called POM-ACE chemotherapy, and then I had something called GEM-TIP chemotherapy. So I had 3 different types of chemo. And then I had a stem cell transplant, which is incredible. I mean, it's hell, absolute hell. But I mean, when you learn about it and you figure out what they're actually doing to your body and what they can do, it's a bloody miracle and a half. So I had a stem cell transplant. And then I was hoping that was going to be it. But there were still tumors, although they believed them to be benign and like not cancerous. There were still tumors inside of me. So they said we'll need to finish with an RPLND operation, which is kind of slice down the middle, intestines to the side, whip out the tumors, stitch back together. Life's a good one. So that's how I ended my treatment.
Wow! And how long did that take? Right.
That was pretty much a full year. Yeah. But the chemos for different cancers are very different. You might have a type of cancer that you might be going in for treatment once a month, a couple of times a month, but it might last for like 2-3 years. With testicular cancer, it's very intense. Like you're literally the way it worked for me, I would have 5 days as an inpatient. So you're in hospital, in a bed for 5 days, having chemo pumped for the full 5 days. Then you'd get like a week at home. And then you were in as a day patient for 3 or 4 days. And then again, a week. 5 days. So it's very intense. There's no breaks. Like I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything really. My mum and dad luckily came down to sort of live with me to help me through things. And I don't know what I would have done without them because it was wild time. So it's very intense testicular cancer treatment.
And it also has lifelong consequences for you, although you've recovered. Because of course it's your reproductive system. Which I presume we've talked about this, but it doesn't work now. That's because of the treatment? It stopped working essentially.
Yes, it's so basically, I mean, the chemo itself pretty much kills sperm and stuff as it is, and the chances of it coming back after treatment are sort of like after 5 years, then it might, and so on. But for me, after the operation, they sort of, as they go through things, complications with an operation, they say to you, there's an opportunity that this could happen and this could happen. One of those things was that we could sever a nerve. That means that you wouldn't be able to produce anything. Like it still works, you still get the feeling, whatever, but nothing comes out. And I said, look, I don't really have a choice. It's one of those things that you know what I mean. You just have to do it anyway. So I was just kind of crossing my fingers that wasn't the case. Unfortunately, that was the case, which means, it put me in a very tricky situation because, first of all, I wasn't even sure if anything would be healthy anyway. Second of all, it doesn't matter now anyway because nothing comes out. And third of all, kind of, it's just a case of I didn't get to bank any beforehand.
Yeah.
So now I was just left in a position of what do I do here?
So you were 23.
Yeah.
That saved your life, which is great. But also you knew at that point that it was not going to be possible for you to, in a straightforward manner, have children. That was, off the cards. And were you with your current partner at that time as well?
Yes. So at the time, it felt like 99% chance impossible. I have had a little bit of luck since then, but yes, I was only just with my current partner, so we just met.
It's right, yeah.
So we just met previous to being diagnosed, literally like 2 or 3 months. We weren't in a relationship. We were still in that kind of really honeymoon phase. And I remember speaking to her and saying to her, look, this is a pretty nasty situation. Why don't we let's just call it off, or just hold it for a moment. Let me get through this. You do what you need to do. And then if we're still in the same situation afterwards, then we can try and come together and see. And she was like, no, I'm my own person. Like, I can make my own decisions. You're not making that decision for me. I'd like to be here for you. I'd like to do this for you. And if it gets too much, I'll say blah, 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 blah. And yeah, I'm glad it was the first time I kind of went, you know what? She's right. Like, I can't make her decision for her. It is her decision ultimately. And I'm so thankful I shut up, because I could have very easily kept going and talked her out of it. But I'm glad I didn't, because now we're 5-6 years down the line with a house together and getting married this year and starting potentially the IVF process together. So yeah.
Congratulations to you both. What's her name? Are you allowed to say?
Yeah, Sophie. Yeah, Sophie.
Congratulations, Sophie. Did you have a nice Valentine's Day, you two?
We did. It was pretty chill, to be honest, because we've got, I was just saying before, we got the wedding coming up, and because we're starting it's starting the IVF process, but we're not doing IVF, we're doing the ICSI. But again, that's potentially going to be quite expensive. So we're trying to save as much money as possible.
So tell me, and then your brother also developed the cancer or got a cancer scare, is that correct?
Yes. So where his story fits into mine is, when I was first diagnosed, he came down to visit me to be the twin brother he always has been, and my little side rock type thing. Like, we've always been extremely close, and this really like threw him off. And he's not an emotional type person, and this is the first time I've really seen him like shaking up, like this is a horrible situation. So he was there. He was literally helping me through everything. He didn't move from the side of my bed. He actually, when everyone else went home, he slept on the floor next to me when he was there. He wanted to spend every given second next to us. So it was so nice to have him there, because actually when he's there, I feel a lot stronger. Yeah. And yeah, he kept me going those days, took me to the toilet and so on, and saw me at my worst. And then obviously he works, so he had to go back, and he was like, don't worry, I'm going to come back every chance I can get. And he went home. He woke up the next morning and his testicle had swollen to double the size.
Wow.
This is weird. And I was like, oh, I hope I haven't bloody passed this on to him. Christ alive, he's just here to help us. I hope it's not contagious.
No, we have those strange thoughts, don't we?
100%.
Cancer isn't catching, by the way.
Yeah. You start questioning these weird thoughts.
I'm sure you did, of course.
But yeah, he was then, right, I need to go and get checked. I don't think he mentioned to it as like straight away, because obviously he was like, hang on a second, these guys are going to be freaked out if I mention this. Let me just go and get checked, and we'll go from there. He told them my situation. They put him in for an ultrasound straight away. They said, I can't remember for comparison what his levels were. I want to say maybe, I don't even think it was 100, but it was like, it was reasonably low. But they were like, right, it is testicular cancer. You need to have the operation immediately. And then we will decide after that whether you need a course of BEP. So he rang us, told us we were in, I mean, as you can imagine, how can you even take that? And both my mum and dad had come down to stay with me at this point. So now they're talking to each other like, who goes back to be with Sean, who stays here. How do you make that decision as a parent? I do not know. But in the end, Sean was like very unselfish. This is very much Sean, by the way. He was like, look, don't come back. Ryan's got it a lot worse there. You stay with him. I've got my partner, who's also called Sophie, by the way. She's going to stay with us for the operation. I'll be fine. Just stay with Ryan. So that's what they did. He had the operation. They whipped it out. He was very much chill, like so chill about it. I'm like, you've got testicular cancer and you're this chill. I was panicking. I was like, I'm going to die. And he was literally like, look, I've got it whipped out. I'm done. So they put him under surveillance. There was this little lymph node that was kind of like causing them like a little bit of like, do we do anything about it, or do we just hold out? And they thought we'll hold out, we'll observe it and so on. And he was under surveillance throughout my treatment. And we got to the end of my treatment. So that year later, when I finally had my RBLND, we got the call. We got it out. There's nothing cancerous in there. Yeah. So now they don't say technically in remission, but I can't remember what they say now. It's something like you don't need any more treatment at the moment. So I was like, this is brilliant. Hugs, kisses, crying, all that malarkey with the family. Such a nice feeling. A bit of an anticlimax, because you can imagine what kind of state I'm in at that point. I'm not in the best frame of mind, the best body. Like I was very much the cancer patient as you see on TV. But it was definitely a relief that I didn't need anything more. I don't think I'd have been able to take too much more. So we were celebrating, we were happy. And then my again, around a week or two later, because my brother came down to celebrate with us, to be with us for the operation, to celebrate with us. And then he went back home. And as he got back home, he had a letter from the hospital that literally said in the letter, you're going to need to come in for chemo. And he was like, nah, this can't be right. You don't just get a letter saying you're coming in for chemo. You get a telephone call saying come in for a consultation, and then you're told that way. That's how it happens. But there was a miscommunication at the hospital, and they thought someone had spoken to him about it. But actually, the first time he realized he needed chemo was on this letter, which it's mistakes happen. But I felt awful from, because it's a big shock. So then the roles reversed. Again, he called us. We were all in absolute pieces. We're like, when does our story end? Do you know what I mean? This is absolutely nuts. And then he has his treatment, and I'm now coming to support him for his treatment. And he has the general course of BEP, which is around 9 weeks or so, which is still, like I said, it's still pretty hellish. It's not nice. And what was worse for him is that every time he finished his treatment, he would go home and he had a reaction to chemo every single time, and he was sick, like violently sick. Now, chemo does make you feel sick and so on, and there's a lot of medication you can take to help with that. But he was violently sick every time. He did not take to the chemo well whatsoever. Whatever his body was doing was fighting against it. It was not pleasant. So every time he ended up back in, and what they ended up saying is, we'll actually just keep you in an extra day just to put you on some IV fluids to keep you going, because we know you couldn't come back in. So yeah, those 9 weeks were absolutely hellish for him. Like I felt like he just had a just as rough journey as I did, although he just had like a part of the treatment, if that makes sense. So yeah, then he finished his course. He is also now in remission, and yeah, luckily, touch wood, we haven't gone back since, and we're both nearly kind of 5 years. This year will be 5 years for us both. So
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think that, clearly you both got the medical treatment that you need, and thank God we've got the NHS, right? Sort of, imagine if you're having to pay for this yourself, this type of treatment. And it's always good to be reminded of how important this sort of free healthcare is, because it seems at times to be under threat, and it shouldn't be, because if you're in the US, for example, if you haven't got the right insurance, this story is very different. You're in a box in the ground. That's what this story is.
Yeah, 100%.
But I do want to focus on the sort of support and aftercare that was or wasn't there, and maybe this sort of motivation for setting up the sort of support groups that you have set up. So for me, I guess as a guy, I'm going, that's quite a significant story, in terms of, I'm a bit older, I've got my kid. I'm not sure how I'd feel about losing the capacity to produce sperm these days. I don't think it would I don't know, but I don't think it would have a huge impact upon me. Okay, the frightening experience of going through cancer, etc. But at my age, I'm not planning to have any more kids. But I'm wondering what it was like for you at your age, sort of what discovering. Well, I can't have kids, and you said one thing was, I thought maybe I should get rid of my girlfriend because that's not right, that she should go through this. What else happened to you in terms of your thinking, your feeling around these things, and any support that you were or weren't offered?
Yeah, I mean, the point blank of it is, it was just absolutely devastating. Like, as I mentioned before, I'm a primary school teacher. I absolutely love my job. I love being around kids. They're such a joy. And I've always, I mean, it's most people do dream of having their own family, but for me, it was just heightened by my passion in my work. A lot of people are quite happy to go to work and not do, and to be away from their kids sometimes. But for me, like, I knew that was always something I've really got a passion for, and to hear that might not be possible. I mean, for at the time as well,
you were told it wasn't going to, that's what you thought, right?
Yeah, 100%. And not only for me as well at the time, like, I thought that was it for Sean as well. We both been through testicular cancer. We both lost a testicle. We've got a set of balls between us, and he's had treatment as well. So I was like, we're both never going to be able to have kids. So my first thought is guilt for our parents. We're never going to be able to give them grandchildren. It's something that they've always wanted as well. We've always talked about this throughout our lives. So that was a horrible thought. Then, obviously, both of us, for our partners, were like, how do we, you feel like you don't hold any ground to be a good partner. You don't feel like,
I can understand.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't feel like you've got anything to offer. If you can't give them a family, then what do you give? I thought that maybe I had to be extra funny, or had to try and do something to try and make up for it, because I can't do that. That's such a big thing.
Did you talk to anybody about those feelings, or were you offered any support or counselling, or was it in your own head?
Initially the treatment, I was given some counselling sessions from a very good male counsellor who knew a lot about testicular cancer, and we dipped into that a lot. But every time we dipped into it, I just cried. I didn't really know what to say, because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to do, and I literally just remember spending most of my sessions with tissue like this, and him talking to me about it, and just telling me a lot and that was absolutely brilliant. But you get given 7 sessions, so you already go into it thinking, this is going to end, this is not something that's going to continue. And I absolutely loved him. He was brilliant, and it was nice to be a disconnect from the family, who I felt like I was constantly burdening with my crying and my sadness and everything else. And like, also with everything, I felt like I became like such a Debbie Downer about everything. Everything was rubbish. Someone would say something, oh, but look, you're doing this now, or this is good. And you go, but what about this? And what about that? And I can't have kids. So what you're talking about, nothing can be good. And to vent on him was so nice, because then I felt like, right, I don't have to say anything to my partner and my family today, because I managed to get it all out. But then as that stopped, then more I felt like did come onto my family, and especially my partner. And we didn't go through like a rough patch or anything, but I personally went through a rough patch, in the sense that I was so low, and I couldn't get out of that. I couldn't get out of that hole, because I just kept thinking to myself, if I can't have a family, what's the point? What's the point of living? Like, what was I'm working? I'm doing all. I'm getting all this money.
Because I mean, it's not a story that's out there very often. Not the testicular cancer, but the guy who faces a childless life and really upsets him. That's not a narrative you hear very often, but it is a fact that men faced with childlessness who want children suffer a lot. So, were you talking, apart from the counsellor, did you manage to talk to anybody about that? Were there any support services? Because I imagine that people understand if a woman has a similar type of cancer and loses her womb from it, then people would automatically assume that she's going to be upset about the loss of the possibility of being a mum, right? Yeah. But then I imagine that most people just didn't make that assumption about you as a dad, that you were going to be upset about, that you were just going to be happy about having lived, as opposed to devastated by a childless future. Is that right? Is that what?
Oh, 1,000,000%. It was never really regarded in the hospital itself. No one really ever talked to me about fertility or what life after cancer would be like with these fertility issues, or ever had a discussion about, okay, this is how you can move on to the next step, or this is who you can talk to about it, or 3 years time things might start to change, so look out for that. There was no kind of, nobody really thought that would be an issue for us, so they never really talked to me about it. I did look for some groups, and obviously there's a lot of charity groups and so on, and there was a great cancer charity that I first joined up with, called Trek Stock, which is like a young adults cancer charity, and granted, it's majority women that went to the events and so on, but they held on some really good events that were some valuable information. And there might be the odd one or two blokes there, which is good to get their opinions, but it was also nice to listen to the women, because at the end of the day, some of them are going through the same situation. But I couldn't help but think to myself, I just want more men. Like, I want to hear what men's opinions on this are, because am I feeling this just because I'm a primary school teacher?
Is this okay that I'm like this?
Yeah.
Other guys, yeah, I get it. I'm navigating this in a healthy or normal way. What about you and your brother? Did you discuss these issues together?
Interesting. Again, like I said, the way we deal with things is very, very different. Like, I'm very over emotional and sensitive anyway. He's very much, it is what it is. What happens. I'll get on with it. He's very strong. He's very focused. He's very like, I feel like if he wasn't able to have children, I feel like he would have been absolutely sound with it. He'd have been like, you know what it is? That's life. And I sometimes wish I had that kind of, that inner dog inside of me, like, you know what? There's so much more worse. There's so many people worse off than me. Like, this is a small thing. Like, I can just find happiness in stuff elsewhere. So we did talk a few times, but he was very much that type of like person that was like, yeah, but you know what? Look where you are now. Look where you came from. You just got to be.
It's not unusual for somebody who's experiencing suffering to tell themselves, which I didn't feel. Sort of, it's a fairly normal sort of thing that people do. But your brother also wasn't faced exactly with what you were faced with, right? Yeah. And you were faced. So I guess you didn't talk about it, and maybe it was too close anyway. And you talked earlier on about the idea of having somebody outside of the family dynamic who you could offload on, so you didn't feel like you were burdening them. So it sounds a bit like, what about with your partner? Did you two talk about it a lot, or what?
We talked about it pretty much every day. It was very much because I again, it made me very, like, it knocked my confidence a lot, like, in terms of
failed as right?
Yeah. And I felt like I needed to talk about it. So
just going to interrupt a little bit, so that people who might be listening rather than watching can't see that Ryan's screen is freezing. So this slightly odd time lag. It's all right, Ryan. Just going to let people know there's a slightly odd time lag, and people might be hear me asking the same question several times. It's because Ryan's not hearing me because of the time lag in the buffering. Just of information for people. So we were just saying you and your partner talked about it a lot. What was you, and you'd felt, I guess, that you were a failure as a man, and why would she want to be involved with you? Because what could you offer to her? What were the sort of conversations both of you had then?
It was all around, well, what will we do? Like, what will happen if we can't? And she just reassured me every time. She never came with solutions. It was always a case of, look, I love you. I want to be with you. Whatever happens, we go through it together. Yeah. And there's no point thinking about what the future may hold. Let's just enjoy it together. And when we face it together. Right. And I found that very frustrating sometimes, because I was like, but then I can't give you what you want. I can't give your family grandchildren, like, I'm constantly the burden in all the situation. And that's just when you're in that low state of mind and that low place, it's hard to shake that off. But she turned me around, like, with just
But it's
constant.
understandable and I think relatable that a lot of people will be able to relate to it who've had significant periods of illness, whether they be physical illness or psychological illness. That sense in which you're a burden and a failure is a very, very common sort of psychological sort of experience that people have. So without a doubt, you're speaking to a lot of people. So essentially, I mean, you have the experience of support from your partner. You have some cancer support groups, but they're mostly women. What about your dad? Did you manage to talk to him?
Yeah. So again, parents were great.
Yeah.
Were absolutely great. I mean, my mum was more of the emotional one, so she's the one that will kind of like try to go into details about things and try to come up with like, okay, if you're feeling like this, then this is what we can do, and give me all the solutions. And my dad's very much a dad of his generation, to be honest. He was very much kind of like, you know, like this is he was, again, more emotional than I've ever seen him before, obviously going through that time. But he's almost very, very much a man of the facts. And I think that's where Sean gets it from. You know, this is the situation. This is how it is. We'll help you do whatever you need to do. But like, there's nothing else you can do about it. So it was kind of nice because you do get an emotional side from some people. You get the facts and the you know, how it is from others. And I guess it's a good combination of all of them. Now, granted, when my mum and my partner were talking to me from the emotional side of it, I just wanted to know how it is. And when I was talking to the ones who told me how it is, I wanted the emotional side of it. Yeah. But I think that's just how it is. Sometimes you can never be fully pleased with any answer because you're just in such a crap situation.
But it does seem a bit like that, you know, it was limited, the sort of support that you were getting. And also because of and this is often the case with chronic illnesses or long-term illnesses, is that one feels I don't want to burden my family. I don't want to keep talking only to my family about this, which is where you were getting support. So was this the motivation you had to think, this isn't great, this situation isn't great, I need to sort of do something about this and maybe try and help improve it? Is this that sense of that where all of this came from?
Yeah, definitely. The lack of, you know, you type in male cancer support on Google and I don't even know if it comes up with any results, to be honest. It's just the tumbleweed just goes across the screen. Yeah. It's a tough area. It's not even an area anyone can tackle, really, because we're all so different and we're very complex, us men. And not many of us like to talk or reach out. But yeah, it was definitely a turning point where I thought, we've got a unique situation here. It's not very often you hear this. It's a good start for a platform to you know, in terms of it's going to build a little bit of traction initially because the story is so unique. And let's see where we go from there. And since that, it's also ended up being like a slightly selfish thing. I got a lot of support from the people on there. So although I was supporting others by raising the awareness and talking about these subjects and bringing up lots of different things, I was also getting the support from them who were then messaging me saying, oh, that was such a relatable post. I feel like this, I'm going for treatment like this. And then we'd end up chatting, and, you know, just as much as they were relaying their issues and problems onto me, I was doing the same. And we just, you know, connected on a different level. And I feel like when someone's been through it, you do just instantly have that connection where you go,
you jumped ahead a little bit and not told people, what is this thing you're talking about? So you noticed there's not enough support and you want to do something about it. So what practically did you do next?
Yeah, so we just came up with an idea to create an online support group for men called Cancer Lads. It's just an online support group. We often get mistaken for a charity because we do a lot of charitable stuff. Yeah. But the idea behind it was literally just to create a community for men with cancer, to raise awareness, to share men's stories, and to raise money for lots of different cancer charities. Right. And we wanted to get as many as men possible to join that so that we could all kind of create an army of cancer brothers, let's say. So just so you know you're not alone. And I know there's a few, like Prostate Cancer UK, Testicular Cancer UK are all big male cancer charities that do support men with cancer. But I feel like they're very much just that one cancer. We wanted to create something for everyone because there's so many different cancers.
Organisations as well, they would admit that themselves. So
yeah, absolutely.
that's fair enough. They have their space in that world, but yours is not. You're not a big organisation that's handing something down. You started from the ground up. So literally, where is this support? What, is it real world? Is it online? How does it look?
So it's mainly online. So it's mainly on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we have like a private Facebook group for anyone who wants to join in, like where it's just men with cancer. More often than not, we get women and people's partners, people's mothers contacting us with issues or things, which is fair enough. We always try and say, do they want to speak to us? And more often than not, we get no, thank you. But at least we put that conversation out there. And I'm more than happy to speak to women because at the end of the day, they are a route into the men sometimes. And if they're not hearing it from us, they're hearing it from them.
What is it that you offer then? You offer a Facebook group that people can join, and
a Facebook group that people can join. And then on the Instagram page, like I literally reply to messages all the time. So most people message me on there. I'm most active on there. And just trying to create as much content to relate to most people as possible. But we've done a whole load of things. We have done a few events in the past where we've done it in the real world. We've had a few people sort of like try to like get together, and we'd like to do more of that. I just think if I wasn't a primary school teacher and I had more time,
exhausted by having 34-year-olds to do.
That is literally it. But I mean, if I had more time, and when I do get more time, I would love to
break, mate. You're doing a good job. And so typically, what happens when a guy joins? What sort of things are you, without breaking confidence, of course, what sort of things are you guys talking about? Is it practical stuff or is it more emotional stuff? I mean, I'm intrigued as to sort of what goes on, really.
It's a mixture of anything. Like it's a mixture of all of that. Like some people will come on and message like, "Oh, I've got a lump here. What do you think?" And sometimes they just come on in a panic. You get like the person that will come and join in a panic. They'll go, "What do you think?" And you go, "The likelihood of being testicular cancer is pretty low, but I would definitely go and get checked because you need a blood test to do these markers. You need to get an ultrasound scan and say that it runs in the family just to push them forward, things like that." Because we know for a lot of the men.
So awesome, Ryan.
Yeah, it's just really helpful to then get them to push it forward. And then they'll get it checked, and most likely it's nothing. And you don't hear back from them. They sometimes even just leave and they go, "Okay, well, I got what I needed from it. That's fine." And then you get some people who have been in there who actually have been diagnosed with cancer and are suffering with different things. And people be like, "My mental health's been suffering recently." And one thing we've been talking about a lot recently actually is the importance of testosterone. So a lot of testicular lads obviously suffer with their low testosterone and how that makes you feel. And a couple of the lads have been saying, "How do I get this stuff? Like it's not easy to get. You've got to prove a lot. You've got to jump through a few hoops." And you hopefully, for me, luckily, you've got to have a good consultant that just knows exactly what you've been through to push it forward. Once you're on the track, but then again, also the journey, because currently the testo gel that I'm on is good, but it doesn't feel like it's given me the full kind of feeling and that energy level that I was hoping for. So then there's a couple of lads that are saying, "Well, actually, I've tried the injections, and it's little conversations like that, little issues that we have, because people just think life after cancer, you're back to being all fine and dandy. The truth is that's not the case at all, and there's a lot of things that come afterwards, and it's a lot of people trying to figure those little steps out. So you might not hear something for a week or so, and then someone might just come in and say, "Well, I'm having this issue. Has anyone else noticed it?" To
be honest, it sounds like you're breaking a huge number of taboos for guys who would, similar to you, find it very difficult to be authentic and honest about what's going on, just feel like a burden to friends, but also people not quite getting it, either just being very informational like your dad and your brother, or overly emotional like other aspects, but not really understanding that there's a combined need. You do need information, but you also need emotional support and It's interesting, the whole conversations around testosterone, for example. I like, because of my work, I've often worked with trans men, for example, and we have lots of conversations about testosterone treatments, and they can sometimes be quite painful, those injections as well. Certain forms of testosterone treatments are quite difficult. Are you getting it yourself, testosterone treatment, at the moment?
Yeah, well, I'm just on the gels at the moment, so luckily that's not too painful. You just have to rub it in.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the sense that you have to not wake up earlier, but you've got to make sure that you've got time to kind of rub it on, let it dry, and all that sort of stuff before you get ready.
And that's gold dust, that sort of information. It's like you're just not going to be able to get that from anybody who hasn't been through it.
Yeah.
And it's also, again, it's not the sort of conversation you think of having. I'm certainly not, blokes are not really good as consumers of healthcare.
No, and I think that's why we've tried to put out more content and more information on the page, because we think even if they don't message us, they are seeing it. And what I've had a few times, I've had a few people message after 2 months, 3 months of following and being like, oh, really, I've been following you guys for so long. This is so true. I'm feeling this myself, and I'm experiencing this myself. What did you do about it? And it's taken them that long to actually finally send a message, because
that's just,
they're just seeing it. They're just seeing the content. What they do.
Awesome. It's gold dust. It really is. It's fantastic. So you yourself, you're fully recovered, you're in remission, your brother's in remission. Now you're starting the possibility of having an actual family. I mean, tell me about that, Ryan. I mean, it's a quite extraordinary story.
Yeah, it sounds a bit bizarre after everything I've just said previously with the whole operation and so on. And to be honest, to me, it's always been like a 1% chance in my head that it's going to happen. But by God, I've held on to that 1%, because I tell you what is very difficult is when you are in work and you're sending those kids home to their parents and you're watching them get picked up by their mums and their dads, and they're picking up, that's hard to do every single day when you're in the situation I'm in. And it really just catches you off guard sometimes. A kid will just say, or even their dad's picking them up and they're so excited to see them, like, Daddy, and you just kind of sit there and go, I want that feeling one time. I really would love that feeling. So I'm seeing it on the daily. So yeah, I was always holding on to that chance that it could be a possibility. And the next step for me to try. So what they did afterwards is they gave me 2 chances to bank sperm after my operation, which sounds so bizarre considering I can't necessarily produce any. Yeah. However, what they do is they, instead of having the sperm in the cup, you have urine. So they will test your urine, because again, the body's quite crazy with what it can do. What it can do is it then can go back into the urine, so into the bladder, and be in the urine. So I did 2 tests for the urine to see if it was in there, and again, got the call both times, there was nothing there. So again, these are just 2 big hits that you take and you think it's never going to happen, but there's still an option. And the final kind of straw for me was this retrieval operation where they go in. I think if you were producing something, then they use a needle to go in, but if you're not, then they like do an incision and go in that way to try and see if there's anything in there. So because I wasn't, they did the incision. I was completely out of it, and they take some tissue around the area as well, and they test that. So initially, after I had that operation, I woke up and they said, and again, I'm completely in a daze at this point, that I'm really sorry, we couldn't find anything. I do apologize. And then that was it. Like that was the big thing for me. That was like, that's it. That was my last chance, over and done with. Devastated. I had to go downstairs to tell my partner while walking, like, I don't know. Yeah. So I mean, in pain, thinking
yes, I can imagine.
I've gone through all of this and there's nothing there. Like it was probably one of the worst days of my life. Which then and then all of a sudden we just about get in the car to go home, and they call us and they go, "Oh, we're really excited to tell you we've managed to collect 2 vials of sperm from the tissue that we collected around." I was like, from the tissue? In my head, I'm thinking like they've got a bit of tissue and they've like drained out whatever. I can't picture what they've done. Like, do you know what I mean? I can't physically understand.
It's probably what they did. It's like, just give it a squeeze and see what comes out.
I honestly don't understand, but they're absolute miracle workers. They said they got 2 vials from whatever it is. So I've got 2 vials of sperm somewhere in London. hidden in the freezers somewhere. And
I did by the SAS, I hope.
yeah, now I don't think that it's the best of quality in terms of, but there was some moving. So in the breakdown of it, we got there's some moving, there's some twitching, and that's why the ICSI process is what we need to do, because because a lot of them were like moving, but like the tails weren't working. So I was like, well, they're not going to be any good. Like, this is not going to be kind of like, this is not healthy. Sperm's not going to produce kind of a healthy child, if that makes sense. And that was a couple of questions that I had. But what the fertility woman said to us, actually, all of the DNA is in the head. They just use the tail to swim. If through ICSI, if we're injecting the sperm, the tail drops off anyway. We go that way. So yeah, that's currently where we're at. We're ready to go. We're also quite understanding that this is not an easy process, and it's also not, there's more chances of it if it not happening than it happening. But I'm at a higher chance than I was previously. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and we're going to start hopefully in the next couple of months. And I guess that's what we just got to hold on to. We've got to stay positive. And then we go from there. After that, we maybe explore other options, but we want to make sure that we've done absolutely everything we can do to have our own. And then if not, we'll explore whatever else we can do.
Yeah, I mean, there are options after that. I sort of, I don't really talk about this very often, but I was an active drinker for a long time, and I quit 14 years ago. And sort of when I woke up from that haze, the saddest thing I felt was that I didn't have a kid. I mean, it was just extraordinary. And it is I can really empathize. I now have one, but he's not my genetic child, but it doesn't really matter to me at all. I love him to bits. He loves me. End of conversation. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It sort of, I love your story. And I love the fact that you've taken this aspect of yourself that you thought was a bit of a burden, the ability to cry a lot and be really sad about shit things happening, and you set up support from it, because you know what, loads of blokes feel the same thing. They just don't have the forum in which to be able to share it in a way that they get. So they do have, they have some blokes in their lives who try to help but are a bit dry emotionally. And then the only other people they've got who've got feelings are the women in their life, but that's not quite the same thing. And actually finding another bloke who can sort of be that golden combination of information giving and practical, but also emotionally supportive, who isn't a member of your family, saves lives, actually, Ryan. It saves lives, mate. Not just telling guys, go get yourself checked, sort of, but also because we know that men make up 75% of suicides.
Yeah.
And that's mostly because we just don't talk. That's what it comes down to, really. So you're saving lives. Is extraordinary. How do people find the support groups? What are they called? Where are
just typing in Cancer Lads on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Hopefully will come up. Just Cancer Lads.
And people can just like and join and things like that.
Like, join, message. Like, we're not a private group. We've got the private group on Facebook, but I mean everything else is public. So, and I spend most of my evenings just speaking to other guys and chatting away and trying to help others.
Well, good, best of luck to you and your partner in the next procedures. I mean, I know that whatever happens, you're going to make a go of it, right?
Yeah.
That's okay. But I do wish you both all the best around that. And thanks for coming on and sharing the story, and maybe hopefully inspiring other guys to talk about this stuff. If guys also, if you've been through tough times, maybe you can think about setting up a Facebook group, because we can't have too many of them, right? So it's really good. It's been lovely to have you on. You stay there. I'm going to just say goodbye to the audience. And what I might do is I might get my team to reach out to you in a little while to see whether we're going to have the sound of pitter-patter Ryan feet happening at some point.
That would be pretty awesome, that, wouldn't it?
That would be, if that happens, great. if that happens, I want to bring you back, and you can bring little baby with you. Yeah.
So,
We will celebrate the miracle that it is. So you stay there. Bye, everybody. For now, I'll see you all next week. And we've got another great show next week. Of course, I don't remember who it is, but it's a bit much to ask me. I can't remember this morning, so let alone what's going to happen next week. But wonderful show. See you all next week, and bye-bye for now.